Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Well, in today's video, I want to talk about something that I get asked quite a bit about, and it seems to be where there's a lot of misinformation, like many things in photography. So let's get into it. I'm here in beautiful southern Alberta. I'm out in the mountains, and it's a perfect time to take a panoramic image. And I hear from so many different people saying, well, how do I do a panoramic image? What are the different ways that you can do it? How much is it going to cost me? Well, let's go through some of the ways that you can do it. First of all, not that I recommend it, but it does work, is your smartphone. Smartphones have, or most of them have, a panoramic setting. You set it to that, you push the button, you do a little sweep, and then it stitches it together and gives you a panoramic image. How good's the quality? From the ones that I've seen, if it was on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being amazingly perfect, they're anywhere from a 3 to a 5, depending upon the camera, depending upon so many different things, how you hold it, the lighting conditions, and so on and so forth. But it does work. I've printed some 16 inches long, 20 inches long, 24 inches long even. And some have worked, some have been okay. So that's the first way that you can do it. The next way that you can do it, if you have a point and shoot camera, many of those, or some of those, have a panoramic setting. So what you do is you take the camera, you go click, 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 click in the panoramic setting, and it stitches them together. Now this seems to be one of those things that's a feature that comes and goes depending upon, well, I guess what features they want to put in the camera. So your camera, if it's a point and shoot, may have it, may not. I have seen a couple DSLRs that had that feature, but that was many years ago, and I think it was something that just didn't really fly with many of the users, or maybe even with the company that put it out. So I don't know if your DSLR has it, but probably not. So if you have a DSLR, what can you do to get a good panoramic image? Well, there's a couple things that you can do. The first is to take the lens that you have, set it at the widest that you can set it, so zoom it all the way out so it's nice and wide. Take one image and then crop the top and the bottom off in an editing program, and then you have your panoramic image. Now, if you have a wider lens, it works better than if you just have, say, a 70 to 200. 70 to 200 is a pretty big crop. And so you're going to lose a lot of the extra around it. So if you have a wider lens, let's say 18 millimeters or 10 millimeters, works really good with that. Not perfect, but it does work. Again, on the scale, from 1 to 10, I would say that's probably between a 4 and a 7. So it does work. The way that I suggest to do it is this. I suggest that you take multiple pictures and then using an image editing program that you go through and you stitch the images together in that program. Now, I find that works the best. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a second, but I want to talk about one more way that you can take panoramic images. And that is that you can go and get a special camera that does just panoramic images. Honestly, unless you're doing a lot of them, unless you have a lot of money to burn, I don't recommend this. So let's jump back to the one I said previous. Take a bunch of images, stitch them together in an editing program, and get a panoramic image. So how do you do this? It's quite simple. You go out, you shoot a whole bunch of pictures, you make sure there's a little bit of overlap between each of the pictures so that when you put them in your editing program, it knows where one picture ends and the other picture starts, and it will automatically stitch them together. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You really don't have to do anything special to do this. But there are some hints that I'll give you that will make your panoramic images even better. So the first thing is, set your camera on manual and take all your images that you're taking for your panoramic on manual exposure. Why? Because if you use it on a program mode, what tends to happen is the camera will expose the first picture one way, the second picture the next way, the third picture the next way, fourth picture the next way. And when it's stitched together, you get one that's really bright, one that's a little bit darker, one that's not. And so if you set it on manual, pick the brightest thing in the scene, take a whole set of pictures, and then stitch them together. They will look more uniform. They'll look, well, like they were exposed correctly. So that's the first thing I recommend. Second thing I recommend, if you're doing it in the distance, this isn't a big deal, but I still recommend it. I recommend putting your camera on manual focus. Or set the exposure, then set the focus for what you're shooting, and then take all the pictures. This stops one picture from being a little out of focus. the other picture being perfectly sharp, the next one being a little out of focus. Again, not a big deal, but it's one of the suggestions that I tell people to do. The third thing, and hey, I'm using one to videotape this, and as much as I don't like it, this is a perfect time to use a tripod. Why? Because you can make sure that your images are all lined up properly. You can do it handheld. I do it a lot. In fact, the image that you see here, that was shot handheld this morning, and it works perfect. It works really good. But a tripod just makes sure it's just a little bit smoother, a little bit better. And the final thing, this is a little trick, and a lot of people, well, you can try it both ways and see what you find works the best. I find that if you're shooting and you're stitching them together, the images look much better if you're shooting around 50 millimeters up to about 70 millimeters. You can either shoot it this way and take the pictures, or if at 50 millimeters it's too close, shoot it this way, so vertically, and take the pictures. If you shoot wider than 50 millimeters, what tends to happen is that your images get a little bit of distortion on the edges. When your stitching program goes to stitch it together, you get images that, well, they don't look smooth. The mountain goes up, and then all of a sudden the mountain goes whoosh, and then it goes over, and then it goes whoosh again, because when you're shooting it wide, it's got distortion on the edges. The other thing that you can do, and hey, this is again one of these things that I tell people, it's up to you, is I recommend shooting in both JPEG and RAW when you're shooting your panoramic images. Why? Because you're taking images over a wide area, you may get the sun brighter on one, duller on the other. If you have raw images, you can go in and you can do a little bit more tweaking. Now, again, the image that you see here, it was shot in JPEG mode, handheld, pretty much breaking a couple of my rules here. So it's not life or death, but again, it will help. So until next time, get out there and take some great pictures. Try some panoramic pictures and let me know how they work out. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.